like people were physically in the same space.
That's crazy. Yes, we're finally filming a podcast together, both in the same city, on campus here in the same
building, in the same room.
Yes.
I can touch this person here, which is wild.
Yes, and it is Tech Week this week, so in the same week that we've finally gotten together for the first time in physically the same space, and started putting our piece together physically, we've also had tech. Yesterday was our huge tech day, which went very well. And thank you to Rachel for coming and spending so much time with us. Super helpful.
Absolutely, like such a trooper as well. Oh God.
Yeah, we felt like that's why we felt like we really wanted to do a podcast today, reflecting on now that we're finally in the same space and we've been able to physically assemble this piece. And through a long tech day yesterday and feedback from Rachel, we felt like this was a great moment to reflect on where the piece has come to be, where it is now. We're still making changes, so I think we wanted to reflect on where it was, and the changes that we're making and why and how we've gotten here.
Yeah,
Would you like to start, Viv?
First of all, it was very satisfying to see the place and the space to come to be, because obviously it's only been like figures on paper at this point. Yeah. We've been working very hard on the interviews and on the heart of this piece, which is obviously the interview footage and kind of like the editing process of that. That was very, very rewarding on its own as well. So it was really lovely to see the 4 screens in the space. We had the live camera. We had everything. And it was just kind of like up to placing everything. And it was lovely to see Rachel as well sat in the piece, just to see kind of like it felt like it was coming alive in that sense, which was very satisfying. But as far as changes have gone, I feel like everything has been reduced down to the essentials. We first talked about like several screens and kind of like an installation piece. It has evolved into a performative piece, an immersive piece at this point. So it's more to do with the fact that we have the audience members sat in a sports bar, cafe-like setting where we are constantly interacting with them. We have the menu items. I'm actually going to insert a menu here because we have finalized it. Woohoo!
Yes, we also have, as this is, even though it's a performative piece, it's interactive, and I think selectively interactive as well, is that each audience member can completely tailor their experience to themselves. So the message that we're trying to convey about male gaze, what it feels like to be watched and even to watch other people, we invite audience members to engage with the material in multiple different ways through the menu, through the interview footage, through games, through performative pieces, through a bingo game that's going on for the whole room. Each person, yes, absolutely. Well, each person can really decide which things they want to engage with. So we're giving you a lot of information, a lot of different representations or metaphors revolving around this central theme of male gaze and voyeurism and watching and being watched, and what's private, what's not.
And what is privacy? Kind of like, is there such a thing as privacy? Or especially in a performative space, like privacy, like this idea of concealment. Does it really actually happen? So,
yeah, and we explore that with 3 different cuts. I know I'm getting onto another topic, so I'll go back. But what Viv's talking about, we explore that specific idea with 3 specific cut-ins in the piece that are ad breaks. That's how we've represented them. I think we'll get back to that later for sure. That's a whole other subject.
There's so much to talk about this piece, to be honest. There's so much going on to be honest.
And especially after having our tech day yesterday, there's so much now that's on our minds that we're like, okay, here's what we got to talk about. This is more than one podcast. We'll do a second one. So, like we were saying, with the different materials that we present to the audience, you get to choose which ones you do and do not want to engage with, perhaps, and when you do and when you don't. So everybody's going to have a different experience, which is inherent for theater anyway, because everybody's coming in with different experience. So what you understand already, what you're learning, what you take away, it's going to be different for every person. So we're giving them all of these different games, bingo, menu, interview footage, things that they can engage with to try to in hopes that people will take away something that's effective for them and people be able to engage with it in a way that's most effective for them. Like some people might choose to engage with the games on the table, some people might not, and that's completely fine because we've injected these metaphors really in every single bit of the space that we've created, which is completely influenced by the interviews, which we used as a score. So the games, we don't want to give anything away at the moment, but the games are created with the thought of male gaze and these central feminist themes in mind. And you will see what that means if you do choose to play them.
So maybe we will get more into the games later on, but it's one of my favorite actual bits of thing. But yeah, there are 4 different games in the space, and let's lock that information for later on.
Plus just the game of the show, which in itself is a game. I mean, we've really injected the game metaphor into everything, and feeling like life is a game. And I think we've taken that feeling and used it, creating this sports-themed space, which is obviously about games. We're inviting all of the participants who we did interviews with to, suspend their disbelief and enter an alternate reality in which they are athletes talking about the game that they play and how the game impacts them and in different ways. And, we're physically putting card games and such things in the space that people can engage with. The menu is a game. So it's just, one of those things that we've decided, like I was talking about before, like people can really interact with it in different ways and take away what they will.
And kind of like, if you do want to hear us talk about more about the interview process, please watch the previous podcast. We go very deep into detail with that one. But I quickly actually want to visit. We talked about the voyeuristic aspect of the piece, and there are several different ways of being seen in the piece and in the space. Not just us, but spoiler alert, there's going to be elements in the space as well, which allows other people to be seen in a way that they potentially are put in a spot that is out or that is surprising. It's not a unpleasant experience, it's just not something that you expect. You don't expect to be seen in that way in a daily life, just existing. I think that's like the most accurate way of describing it. But also we have the live camera installed in the space, and which is technically that also is that is also the footage displayed on one of the back walls of the performance space displays obviously the whole space, which means that there are audience members visible in the camera footage as well. It's not recording, it's just there to display the like voyeuristic view of the space. And these ad breaks that Olivia was talking about earlier happen in front of that camera with our backs facing the audience members, which means that there's this idea of privacy, of a liminal space or non-space where we don't exist within the same parameter as the audience members. So there's this idea of that being a private space, however it is constantly being perceived by the camera from the front, which means that it's never really actually private because it's also going to be fully on display on the back wall of the performance space.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And I think what Viv's talking about too with the idea of like the live feed camera watching audience members, it's another one of those ways that we've introduced the duality of voyeurism. And we've really explored male gaze from multiple angles here. It's not just inviting audience members to feel what it's like to experience being gazed at and being watched, but we're also inviting them to gaze at others and see what does that feel like. So we're exploring different sides of the issue of male gaze, of both being watched, feeling watched, watching other people in the same space as you. Yeah, it's very interesting. And even we'll have cut-ins, which I think we won't get into now just because they're meant to be a little bit ambiguous and up to your interpretation, but we'll have cut-ins in the interview footage as well that invite you to both watch and be watched by strangers.
Yeah, and what I will say about those cut-ins is that they work in juxtaposition with the live camera. So there's a duality presented there, which is going to be very, very interesting.
Overall, the space that we've created, while it seems like a very specific setting, which it is, the sports bar, it's very specific, it's very niche. The piece overall is very ambiguous. The way that we present everything is very up to interpretation. You can engage with it as you might. You can take away what you will. We're not really laying anything out for the audience. We want to give you opportunities to engage and see what you can learn from it, what you can add to it even. There are opportunities for you to have your own voice in the piece. So it's really, I mean, that's what makes it a piece that's hard to rehearse too, which is why it's been so good to put it together this week, is just because it is an immersive piece that relies a lot on audience interaction. We have a framework, it is performative, and we have a framework for the performance, but in the spaces in between, it's entirely audience interaction.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, kind of like going back to the menu that we showed earlier, not going more into the game aspect of it, but kind of like the care aspect of it, is that we, in this piece particular, obviously there's going to be the shock aspect of the interviews that are going to be displayed, and then there's to support the comfortability levels of the audience members is the care aspect, which is the menu, which is technically just taking the thematics of the interview and just literally they are all derived from the interview, the menu items. I'm going to display the menu again here so you can have a look. And it's there to really truly twist that unpleasant nature of those voyeuristic pleads or voyeuristic demands of usually femme-presenting people in a way that is a good and a positive thing. So that's kind of like all the orders are actually they are genuine and they are actually care items. So kind of like they come from a sincere place of wanting to provide something nice for the person who's ordering them. So I feel like that's the overall tone of it. And kind of like we are in the space not to humiliate people, not to make them feel bad, but to be there to support them through the journey that they're potentially going through with the interview footage that's already displayed. Yeah, and what I will say about that too is while the menu items are absolutely acts of care, audience members can, at their will, whenever they'd like, ring the metaphorical bell and request any sort of care that they might want or need in the moment. So it can be for fun or it can actually be for support throughout the piece, because it is difficult material. But at the same time, it's also a bit of a game, which is one of the things that we discussed yesterday with Rachel, is that we will definitely be playing a bit with the audience members as you order from us and request things from us. It's still going to be an act of care. It's going to be genuine, but there's going to be a little bit of play involved, injecting more of the game theme into it and a bit of the back and forth and the duality of it. I think with that, this might be a good place to end this podcast and then get into the feedback that we received and the changes that we'll be making and, the work that we're doing today and moving forward for the next few days in another podcast. How does that sound? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we've already thrown a lot of information at you. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us.
We'll see you later. Thank you so much.
Stay nice.
That's a spoiler. Please watch the next podcast. Bye.